We are actually taught to believe that silence is empty. But the truth is, silence is not empty. Silence is actually revealing. And what it reveals depends on what has been stored. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to Beyond the Known. This is your host, Amit. Today, before we begin, I want to invite you into something slightly uncomfortable. Nothing dangerous, just unfamiliar. I invite you, wherever you are, to notice the silence that exists right now. Not the absence of any sound, but the absence of doing. Just notice what happens inside you when nothing is required. Very simple. Just notice what happens inside you when nothing is required. If you felt even a slight tightening, a slight restlessness, or an urge to distract yourself, then this episode is for you. Today, we are going to explore a question that lives quietly beneath most of us in our spiritual journeys. Why does silence feel unsafe? Why, when everything becomes quiet, does the mind rush in? Why does the body get tense? Why does the urge to scroll, plan, or think simply arise? Isn't silence not supposed to be peaceful? Then why does it feel so threatening? So let me ask you something gentle. When was the last time you actually sat in silence? When was the last time you actually sat in silence without reaching for anything? Not even your phone, not even music, not even any thought, and actually felt at ease. No judgments, just notice. We are actually taught to believe that silence is empty. But the truth is, silence is not empty. Silence is actually revealing. And what it reveals depends on what has been stored. For many people, silence does not feel like peace. It actually feels like exposure. Because silence actually removes buffers. No distractions, no narratives, no noise to draw out of what has been waiting. Silence does not create any discomfort. It actually uncovers it. Let's slow down a bit. From a very young age, most of us actually learn that safety comes from engagement, isn't it? Talking, performing, responding, being useful, being agreeable, or simply just being busy. Do you know, silence was rarely modeled as safe. From some, silence meant being ignored, while for others, it meant tension. And for some, it meant waiting for something bad to happen. So the nervous system actually learned that silence is uncertainty, and uncertainty is danger. Let me ask you something, and answer honestly, even if it surprises you. What did silence mean to you in your early age? Was it calm? Or was it charged? For many of us, I believe silence was not neutral. It was pretty quiet before any argument. The quietness before any disappointment. The quietness where emotions were unspoken. The quietness where needs were unmet. So the body remembers, even if the mind says, I want peace, the body says, be careful. And this is why when things finally slow down on a retreat, during meditation, or even during the night, anxiety can surface. Thoughts accelerate, memories arise, sensations intensify, and people think I am bad at meditation. But actually, what's happening is this. The system is no longer distracted enough to keep the old materials suppressed. Silence gives it space. That's exactly what we are taught. So let me take a pause and ask you another question. What shows up for you when there is nothing to do? What shows up for you when there is nothing to do? Is it sadness? Or do you feel restlessness? Or there are thoughts coming in? Or is it a sense of emptiness? Or simply a vague fear? Do you know something? There is no wrong answer. There is only information. And here is something important for you. Silence doesn't ask you to fix anything. It actually asks you to feel. And feelings, especially the unprocessed ones, can actually feel unsafe if we were never supported through it. So I'm sure many of us actually confuse silence with loneliness. But do you know, silence is not loneliness. Silence is intimacy with yourself. And intimacy can feel threatening, especially when you've spent a lifetime disconnecting to survive. So let me ask you another question. Slowly, please. Do you trust yourself enough to be with yourself without any distractions? Do you trust yourself enough to be with yourself without any distractions? If that question feels heavy, it's not because something's wrong with you. It's simply because trust takes time to be rebuilt. There is also another layer into this. Silence dissolves identity. When there are no conversations, nothing to perform, no tasks to fulfill, then who are you? Ask yourself, who are you? For many, identity has been built around movement and noise. I am what I do. I am who I help. I am who I produce. Silence actually removes those reference points. And the ego panics. And do you know, when the ego panics, the mind actually rushes in with thoughts. Not because it's broken, simply because it's trying to restore to the norm. We feel that noise actually feels like control. But the truth is, silence feels like surrender. And now let me ask you something honestly. Do you associate stillness with loss of control? In fact, in silence, one cannot manage perceptions. One cannot curate any meanings. And one cannot escape inward. And this is why silence is deeply spiritual and deeply confronting. It actually brings you face to face with your inner landscapes without any filters. And do you know, many people say they want peace, but what they actually want is relief from discomfort. Peace is not the relief, peace is the presence. And presence means allowing what is. And here is something rarely spoken about, that silence often activates the nervous system before it actually soothes it. Because the system needs time to learn that nothing bad is about to happen. And this is called reassociation, teaching the body that stillness is actually safe. Let me ask you something more. When you slow down, does your body relax or does it brace? That answer tells you everything, isn't it? Silence also threatens unresolved grief. When life is loud, grief usually stays hidden. And when the life gets quiet, the grief actually surfaces. One tears without any stories, sadness without explanation, a heaviness that you can't name. This doesn't mean silence is wrong. It actually means something wants more space. Let's take a pause here. Connect to yourself, and if emotions are rising as you listen, don't analyze them. Just notice. You're not being overwhelmed. You're actually being invited. Silence disrupts the addiction of stimulation. In modern life, it actually trains us to constantly consume information, sounds, validations, and even distractions. While on the other hand, silence feels like withdrawal. The restlessness is not danger, it's actually a detox. Now, let me ask you something else gently. How often do you give your nervous system permission not to be entertained? And do you know there is a reason why the ancient traditions valued silence? Not because it made people any special or it made people look more honest, but silence reveals attachments. Silence reveals fear. Silence reveals the truth. Yet another fact is that silence must be entered gradually. Forcing silence can feel violent. And do you know, true stillness is invitational, not imposed. That's why even very few conscious breaths can be more powerful than hours of forced meditation. Let me ask you something more. What would you feel like to approach silence as a friend opposed to as a task? You know, over time, something changes. The mind slows down, the body softens, and the urge to escape actually fades away. Not, not because silence becomes exciting, but because it starts to become more familiar. It starts to become more safe. You actually feel you're home. And in that silence, something subtle starts to emerge. Not visions, not answers, please, but listening. You begin to hear your inner rhythms. You begin to know your limitations. You begin to know your needs. And most important, you begin to understand your truth. Let me ask you one more question, please, and just sit with it. If silence could speak to you, what do you think it has been trying to tell you? I know it's pretty deep. Silence is not asking you to disappear. It is asking you to arrive, but fully. And if silence feels unsafe right now, please, you are not broken. You're simply learning. You are learning how to become with yourself. You are learning how to be with yourself without any kind of armor. And this is not any weakness. This is simply courage. Thank you so much for sitting with me in this space. Thank you for not rushing past what matters. This is your host, Amit, and this is Beyond the Known. Until next time, let silence meet you gently as it has been waiting patiently.